everyone. Welcome to Techstrong Gang. I'm your host, Mike Bizarre. Today, we're going to be talking about CrowdStrike and gift cards. Cookies apparently don't crumble. And, well, privacy violations might cost you $115 million. You're watching Techstrong Gang, and we'll be back in a minute. All right, folks, welcome back. Our guests today are Chris Blask, who is still hiding out somewhere north of the border, but it's actually not the government that he's hiding from. It's the heat wave. Chris, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you. And, of course, we have Mitch Ashley, who is not necessarily hiding out in Denver, but he's in his usual location. Mitch, how you doing?
I'm in my perch high above Denver and the Rockies of the Colorado, so.
And I, of course, am baking in Florida one more time. So here we go.
That's a song, isn't it? Baking in Florida one more time.
It should be. I don't know who sang it, but we'll see what happens.
That's Jimmy Buffett, I think.
All right. I want to jump in. It's been a week now since this whole CrowdStrike thing blew up in our faces. And I don't know if you guys were watching this, but apparently the CrowdStrike's handing out $10 gift cards to everybody. Their troubles. I'm not quite sure if that qualifies as insult to injury, but it's debatable at the very least. We'll see how it goes. But Chris, what's your sense of, looking back at this now for the past week? How much trouble is CrowdStrike really in? Because we've seen they were kind enough to be transparent about what it went wrong. But will people have faith in CrowdStrike going forward, or what do you think?
Well, I think we can look at, our advice as security people to organizations writ large. Right. It's, in this case, it's one of us. It's one of our companies. It's the cybersecurity company that's the problem this time. But they seem to me to be doing the right things. We look at the grand breaches of history. Most of those companies are still here and they recovered and they moved on. So I think, generally speaking, they'll make it through this. But it's not a happy day.
Mitch, what should they be doing? I'm not quite clear to me that $10 gift card's going to do it, but
I think they should be sending a weekend in Cancun to every system admin, security engineer, or wherever your choice of island you want to go to. That's what they should be sending, or just have one massive cruise or something, a big party for people. CrowdStrike isn't a consumer brand, right? It's a security brand in our industry. It's not even well known to business people. Security people know about it. CISOs know about it. Maybe the organization knows more about it if they've experienced a breach, or CrowdStrike has been part of investigating something. So, it just shows you, I think the lesson is this can happen to anybody. And if it can happen to CrowdStrike, it can happen to you in your software process and how you deploy software, because the fact of the matter, errors happen. We do everything we can to improve quality and fix them. And if they were perfect, we wouldn't need to test them anymore. But we have errors; they just happen. So, it's interesting. I did a webinar yesterday talking about embedded data analytics in products, and one of the purposes of that is to have telemetry about performance and availability and how products are performing. And I immediately thought of, of the recommendations, maybe that's another one for CrowdStrike is really think about how you get better telemetry on your software performing in organizations. Maybe they have that already. I'm not embedded that much into CrowdStrike's products, but provided, you're going to address the privacy concerns, I think that would be really helpful.
I'm pretty sure that when we start doing DevOps case studies in the years ahead, that CrowdStrike will be a primary example of what not to do.
Yep.
But Chris, to Mitch's point, a week ago, hardly anybody knew who CrowdStrike was. So do you think, a month from now, executives are going to be asking security people, who are we using for security? Or is it just going to go back to being something that, only the security people care about?
Well, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, right? So don't expect, C-level attention to maintain its excitement level for security. It'll come back down, but it'll be at a different level and different shape, right? With we're on this ratcheting course moving forward, right? And there's a lot to be said about this particular incident. I can say some. I'm sure, Mitch, you have lots of points you made. You made some already. And that's good, for us to all look at. But I think the real lesson is that we still have systems, these global systems, not individual components like CrowdStrike or Microsoft or whoever, but airline systems, global transportation systems that don't have a lot of redundancy, right? That a single point of failure, a single mistake somewhere can bring the whole thing down. And we're not going to avoid single mistakes ever, right? But we will mature out of having systems that, if one company somewhere makes one mistake, large, this scale of ramifications unroll.
Mitch, there's a saying that goes something about the grace of God go I. Do you think that other companies are going to learn from this CrowdStrike incident, or are they kind of just watching it much like a traffic accident, but they're not actually thinking that maybe they need to improve their DevOps workflows?
Well, every time I write something about CrowdStrike's outage, I think of let he or she cast the first stone, that outage. Just like, hope I'm not being guilty of anything. Of course, do what I say, not what I do. But, I think for all of us, if we thought, or if we had experiences that said, these issues are systemic at CrowdStrike, and there's all these things that, fundamentally have to be fixed in something about how they work, a process, how they deliver software, et cetera. Then I think the security people who buy these products and services would elevate the security of it much more seriously. Now, if we had another outage in a month, guess what? It's moving on the heap, right? Now you can't justify to the business, I'm going to give them 3 strikes. And by the way, it cost us millions of dollars, it's just a little strike. That's all. So it definitely gets the attention.
Is there a pun intended in that?
Yeah, you saw what I did there? I realized I did that after I said it, but I'll take credit. But I'm bumped to Chris's rim shot. Thank you, Chris. Anyway, I have no idea where I was going with that. But no, if this is systemic, it's a different issue. If it's okay, even though it's tremendously bad, if it's a one-time event, either way, we all can learn from this, because we can be guilty on a small scale or on a big scale in our own worlds of making these kinds of mistakes.
Chris, is there any irony in this? And I asked the question because, for so long now, security people have been telling developers that you need to get your supply chain in order and you need to, make sure your software is secure. And yet, one of the biggest instances of somebody not following the rules is a security company.
Yeah, we all love irony, right? And when it happens to us, if we have good grace, we can grin and take it, because yes, at the same time, and this is a lesson for everyone, I suppose, is that security companies are just companies. Vice President one out there right now, and they have the same struggles as everyone else. And so this is why the internet works. This is why open source works, why freedom of speech and all this good stuff works, is because there's communities of companies, right? And to my earlier point, as a critical infrastructure consumer, as much as possible, I should be building redundancy in, so I'm not counting on any one particular company not to make any mistakes whatsoever. But the point is that even as a security company, we have to use the tools available. And there are not yet, you mentioned supply chain, where I spend a great deal of my time these days. We're working really hard on making the tools and the structure, so you can really see across this entire, in the Department of Homeland Security supply chain working groups that I'm part of every week. CrowdStrike is a topic of conversation. And I said the same thing there that I say here, that what we need, are systems so that across the supply chain, you can see everything quick enough to do things about it. Those don't exist yet. So can any one company, no matter, CrowdStrike's a big security company, they have the resources, but the tools aren't there for us and for them any more than they are for anybody else. Not really, not yet.
Mitch, whenever there's an issue like this, there's always a call for accountability, and somebody wants to, put somebody's head on the proverbial block. But, as you think about it a little bit, maybe the folks at CrowdStrike who are involved in this are probably know more now about DevSecOps workflows than anybody out there. So they learned it the hard way, obviously. But, we have this principle of empathy in DevOps. I mean, should we just take a step back and give everybody a break?
Well, I think in our culture, our country, we are a society of second chances. We do give people another shot at it. And whether that's company and products, there's one time where, I loved Apple and then I hated Apple. And now I don't know if I love it, but I'm in the ecosystem again. It certainly, if you thought CrowdStrike was bullheaded and wasn't learning from this experience, then you'd really question like, okay, that's not a good bet long-term or maybe even short-term, given the level of transparency and what they've said in their remediation of what they're not only fixing the problem, but they came out with their preliminary incident report and talking about the things that they were going to change. And I was very happy to see, yes, we're going to change these quality processes, reviewing it, looking for bugs in their validator tools, things like that. Now, that's one of the things I think also kind of a reliance on your own technology to validate your stuff. And the tool that one of the bugs was in the testing tool, validation tool. So I certainly believe a company like CrowdStrike, given their credibility in the security space, is learning from this. Now, are they going to be the leader in DevOps and DevSecOps? I don't know that that's the case. Boy, it'd be a great position for them to take if they really want to say, let's turn this tragedy into something that helps the whole industry. We're going to kind of do an open seminar on how you really elevate what you're doing in a DevSecOps world, something like that. Talk about a benefit out of a real tragedy.
Chris, are the security people who were impacted by this and all the organizations impacted, are they in a forgiving mood by now, or what's the mood?
Oh, I think so. And as I look across our topics for today, I think it's a good day for me, because, I like to talk about the maturity of things. Let's set our expectations. If we just came up with something, and everybody adopts it, we shouldn't be totally surprised, that it falls over from time to time, right? And we are sort of we're somewhere in the middle of developing the internet and cybersecurity and so forth. And some of those artifacts, to your point, if you've been in this industry as an operator, to your point exactly, for a period of time, and you can't grin a little bit and forgive, then you haven't learned the lesson. So I think we as a community will be fine. A lot of our friends, the CEO of, over there, and I, we all know each other, right? Yeah, we're not in a really aggressive mood. I don't think. Mitch, do you disagree? Or people seem really cranky, or are we all just sort of shrugging and smiling?
Well, I can't speak for customers per se. I mean, when you have a real bottom line financial impact, guess what? It gets big scrutiny and big attention. So if you're going to stay with this vendor, whoever it is, how are you assuring me this isn't going to happen again? And that's a tough question to answer when it's not your stuff. It's from a third party. And there's risks in switching, and it's not an easy flip the switch. Oh, let's just download a different agent and poof, we're done. No, it's not that. It's simple. So it's a tough question to answer. I think that's the, post the ungodly hours people have had to spend to get servers to reboot and not be corrupted anymore. In addition to that, I think that's where the hard conversations are happening between the CISO, the CIO, CTO, and the rest of the executive, maybe even the board, to say, what are other companies doing? Are people flocking away? If they're staying with CrowdStrike, why? And what are they doing for assurances? What do we need to do? Those would be the questions I would be asking, no matter what it was, if something caused this kind of a financial damage to my company.
I think your comments a minute ago about the way they've handled the transparency is sort of the answer to Mike's question. I think the reason, they think the gestalt feel I get from our community is that, all right, we're watching, and they're not messing up, they're owning it and so forth. And frankly, call out to the team at CrowdStrike. I think Mitch has the exact right idea. Think about the cost. Spend $1 million. Have a big event for all the people who literally worked 72 hours over the weekend to get the world back on right. Why not?
All right. Just one point about all those people who worked that hard, and God bless them for doing it. But let's be fair. plenty of blame to go around. If I'm on the board, I'm asking those people, how is it we got so dependent on one company that could take down our entire IT environment? So let's not all just start pointing fingers.
And where else do we have that dependency, right? Is there some other vendor that could do the same thing to us, right?
Exactly. I think we're all learning some lessons the hard way. So hopefully by this time next week, we'll be past this conversation. And as they say, news cycles come and go, and hopefully there won't be a second round of this, but cross your fingers, toes. And in the meantime, we wish everybody involved best of luck. And we hope that your next week is much better. All right. We'll be back in a minute. All right, we're back and we're talking about Google and cookies. Apparently, Google at one point said they would eliminate cookies, and that got all the folks who are concerned about privacy very excited. And then now it turns out Google's saying, well, not so fast. We're not quite going to get rid of these cookies. And that has all kinds of implications, not just for privacy, but I think security as well. And the folks at the Electronic Freedom Foundation are a little ticked off. Chris, what's your take on cookies? I mean, I think we all take them for granted, and yet it seems like we should revisit this whole conversation.
Well, that Security Boulevard article on this topic, I think makes a really good point. Google's making 80% of their revenue through advertising. The economic motivations lighten up a certain way. And I think this, as I mentioned in the green room, I think this leads into our last topic. I think we're moving down a path where issues like this are commonly understood enough that, look, I'm okay with advertising. I'm okay not paying for things and letting people who want to sell me things advertise and cover the costs. And if, we have systems out there that mean the ads I see will be of things that I might even theoretically care about, even better, right? And this is my point about where we are and this is not even the industry. This is the world, this global population, all of our friends who are not IT people, not security people. There's a general shared understanding that we're okay with that. However, so now we're getting to that point where we can have the however conversation, and it's not just a bunch of, hardcore tech nerds like me, but it's everybody. It's the classic Thanksgiving dinner table. So, yeah, I find this and, the issues we're going to talk about the next segment leading us down the path where we can have the kind of conversations we need to have, where it's not, I don't want anybody looking at me whatsoever. I'll throw in an old story, right? Early 90s, before the web had really caught on, it was all sort of text and Usenet. Someone in a group was traveling from Toronto down to Florida and put a camera on their porch. And there was this huge conversation about, oh my God, how terrible it is and privacy and whatnot. And I made the point then, it's like if you live in a small town, right? Walk out in your backyard on a Sunday in your bathrobe. Before you're back inside, your neighbors, they know about it at the barbershop. And we accept that. We're okay with that because that's familiar. So this cookies, is a great thing because everybody understands it to a certain extent. Most people don't really know what it means, but it's this common word that the entire population associates with this issue. Where is my information? Who has it? Because frankly, the answers to that are not good. It's the motivations of organizations. Again, I've been a vendor. I'm one of the people to blame for this effectively because I make money by having my products and services and so forth succeed on the internet and having other people do so. So my economic motivations of organizations I work with, don't necessarily lead themselves down that privacy rabbit hole. So we haven't gotten the real public input, because the public hasn't really understood it well enough. So I think this is a great topic, right? Let's put, everybody understands browsers. Everybody knows about Google. Everybody knows about Chrome. Everybody knows about cookies. Let's put this on the dinner table and say, how comfortable are we with this really? And the answer is not much. And it shouldn't be, because we don't have the transparency. Nobody really knows what their information is.
Mitch, do you think people are more aware of this? And I asked the question because it's almost impossible these days to go to any website that doesn't pop up with a little thing that says, accept all cookies. And I think that's part of the EU essentially gets the credit for making people do that. And I think people, first they look at it and it's kind of annoying, and then they click on it and they're like, okay, whatever. But then after a while, you keep getting hit with this thing, and then you're like, well, what are these cookies? And then it becomes, you're aware that suddenly people are tracking what you're doing. And, some folks I talk to are moving over to DuckDuckGo, and are we seeing a shift here in what browsers we might use because of cookies and tracking?
I don't know that it's that substantial, Mike, but first thing I got to say is, I love me some Chris Blask, however, in the morning. So thank you, Chris, for checking that off for me. I always could, however, conversation. I've got a sign on the front of our house that says, no soliciting and no banjos. And so far, only the no banjos part has worked. No banjos have showed up at my house so far. So I'm just not a fan. Sorry, banjo players. I think cookies are the same thing to people. They're just like, why do I want to deal with it? Only time I really care about it is when it starts doing things that make me uncomfortable. Like, how did it know that I was looking at this dot card on TikTok, and suddenly that's popping up in my email or in another application on Amazon or something like that. So when it gets kind of the creepy factor, people get concerned about it. Like, I really don't want, you're reading my browser history. What are you doing? People want to know. I think that the thing here is it's hard. The lesson for me is it's hard even for Google to change the momentum around an industry adopted standard, not small as standard, of cookies. And they came up with a new scheme, and basically people pushed back and said, you got to be kidding. We're not going to do this. Nobody else is going to do this. This costs us a lot of money. And yes, you're Google, but we're going to hold out until we see that this is a smart thing to do. So in place of that, they came up with they put it back on the end user. Wrong answer. Now you can, in the browser, we'll let you manage cookies. And what the hell are all those things for anyway? How are end users going to know what cookies they want to have and don't want to have? Because if you look, there's so many things there that nobody's going to recognize unless they're in advertising or, the kind of browser and software space. So I think cookies are here forever. Big C cookies I love. Little C cookies with browsers, they're both here forever.
I've changed my behavior, and it kind of goes this way. And maybe I'm the only one, so don't follow this as gospel. But, I am reluctant now to search for things on one-offs, right? Because I don't want this massive stream of content. And, a simple example would be I'm a Yankees fan, so I'm not likely to search stuff for Red Sox because I just suddenly don't want a stream of massive amount of web content about the Red Sox coming into my browser. And so it's kind of counterproductive with all these cookies because I'm thinking longer about what it is I might actually use Google for, because I know it's going to manifest into everything, including all my social media feeds, or at least it feels that way. And so to a certain degree, Chris, has it become counterproductive?
It has, right? And this is, it's easy to blame the companies, right? But you have to think this through. If you work for Google, it's a publicly traded company, and you put in place processes that lower shareholder value, then you've got some splaining to do, right? There are retired people out there that invest in your company, expect you to maximize, their investment in you. So the economic motive isn't just greed. There's a fiscal and, quite often a legal responsibility to, as an actor inside a corporation, do what makes the most profit. So we need this public pushback. We need to get to this point where, the word creepy, how often does the word creepy come up in this context in every household, around the world in the last 12 months. Mitch, what you're saying, it's like, and well, both of you, right? We all have this creepy feeling that no matter what I do, I'm suddenly going to get this massive flood. And this is the point for everybody out there who's not a tech nerd. Look, I am, and I don't know, because I can swear I'm just having conversations sitting here talking with my friend, and all of a sudden I start getting ads on my phone. Are the bloody microphones open? Are you really listening that much? Is it because I have Alexa here? I don't know. And nobody knows. And it's that lack of transparency that causes the dissatisfaction that makes us want to resolve this.
You're not the only one who's seeing that phenomenon where you feel like you're having an actual conversation with somebody and then all this stuff pops up on your machine. I know I've seen it. My wife has remarked on it. Many of my friends have remarked on it. So I don't know what causes that, and maybe it's just because we're all more aware of it, and maybe it's not causation is correlation and all that other stuff. But Mitch, do you think, things are getting a little weird?
Well, privacy is much more of a topic than it has been for the general users and consumers. I still think all of us give away too much permission because we just click on the YOLOs and move forward, or click on the allow all cookies and move forward, right? Do we want to spend our lives detailed management of who has what data about me and can they use it? It's a real challenge because there's a trust that people have, or at least a belief that, it must be okay because they're being allowed to do this when it isn't necessarily true. So, are we going to have a wood fire shed incident of some privacy more than just data getting stolen, but because of cookies and that kind of thing? We'd have to have something that would drive us away from this and really sour end users from I don't want those on my machine. Yes, it's at the creepy factor, but does it get to the creepy guy outside the window factor? Then I'm worried and I'm going to do something about it. There's another technical term, right, Chris?
Right. Well, there's an app called Life 360, if anybody knows this one. And we as a family, me and my wife, our three grown kids, we use it, and it shares your location. You can see each other on maps, right? And this is the kind of thing that I've played with over this whole era, over the decades. Yeah, there was a car. I'm trying to think of the first time this came up. Anyways, there was a car app. We bought a car, and I realized I'm in Germany, and I can see where the car is. And it was interesting. It was sort of comforting. It was like a connection with my family at home. I don't feel so separate. And as we talk about the Life 360 thing, look, if you are going to be looking, tracking, and I see articles written about this, tracking your kids. It's not about tracking your kids. It's about knowing where people are. Now, if you're going to use that in a creepy way, you're a creep, right? Most people aren't, right? And you can just as well do it without the technology. You can have your friends who live on the other side of town call you when they see your kids, or, if you're going to use, it is my point about the small towns, right? We understand privacy intrinsically. We may not be able to describe it, but we have a good idea of what we expect people to know and not know. But in this digital world, we just don't, right? And even if it was possible to find out what people know, it would take more time than we have. So, if people are intrinsically creepy, then they're going to be creepy regardless. If we allow companies to go down this path, they get creepy. We have allowed companies to get creepy.
I have friends that would love an app similar to that, but it would show them maybe at the grocery store when they're in a bar across town. That would be good.
Yeah, it's like I had a friend who
well, you can turn it off if you want to, but again,
But if I turn it off, it's immediately suspicious behavior, right? Because they're like, can't find you.
The first butt dial I know of is a friend of mine who got a cellular phone, the kind that used to be in the box that you carried, like a briefcase, and they took it with them golfing and butt dialed it and called his wife and, how was work today, honey? Oh, it was really, really bad. Well, what were you talking about on the third green there with Bob and Tim? So it's still happening.
I think ultimately it's going to come down to awareness, and who knows, maybe we need some congressional hearings to drive that awareness. I'm again, we're probably not going to count on Congress to actually do something about it. But, those forums they create certainly lead to a lot of conversation. And I guess before we leave this topic, I would just remind everybody, hey, next time you're watching that instructional video on a site that you're not supposed to be looking at, just remember, you're not the only one watching it. We'll be back in a minute.
Discover how Cloud Native is becoming the new compute stack. At Cloud Native Now on July 25th, we will explore the transformative shift towards modern containerized and microservices-based applications. Learn why Kubernetes remains a dominant force in container orchestration and how WebAssembly is emerging as a powerful complement. Don't miss this opportunity to stay ahead in cloud native development. Register now and claim your spot in the future of tech innovation.
And we're back with our third block on data privacy. And there was a lawsuit involving Oracle that Oracle apparently settled for $115 million, citing regulations from the state of California and federal regulations that said that they had violated policies. Oracle declined to admit any guilt, but settled the case anyway. But it seems to me at the core of this was allegedly Oracle was grabbing data from places out that they didn't have permission to get and then correlating that with data that they had internally. And apparently that's a no-no. Chris, what's your sense of, are the data privacy regulations getting better and we just haven't noticed? And will we see more of these kinds of enforcement actions?
Yes and yes, right? We see GDPR and, some things that catch our attention and so forth, but this has been incrementally coming along for a while. And this is why I said, as I looked at our topics today, this builds well, right? I think that you have to have a feedback on where does this go from? You had to have the crime before the law, right? You had to have the problem before we figure out what the solution is. And these are big issues. How do we get what we want, which is all this access to all the information and communication and so forth without, losing the things that we also want, like our privacy. And this particular instance, this ruling, I think is a good sum on the scale, to help companies, have the arguments for their shareholders why they're not going after, things that may be lucrative because, there's a financial downside. We may get sued and lose. Those are, that's a hammer. This is not, fine machinery. They will, to your question, the regulations, the laws, the both explicit and implicit regulations, right? Maybe may not be a law, but companies will find out that is better behaving a certain way.
Mitch, do you think that this will actually result in some better behavior because somebody will look up and say, do we want to be the next Oracle in a lawsuit?
Well, 150 million sounds like a lot of money, but to a large organization, large company, is it really a lot of money? When you're, revenues in the billions. I think one of the things that caught my attention about this is the way the plaintiffs filed the suit or filed for the agreement that they came to was talking about digital dossiers. We all hear kind of dossiers in the political sense, I think, these days. But we have to get agreement from people that are coming to Techstrong sites to sign up for a webinar or a virtual event. And, we say right there that we will use this information and we'll share it with sponsors of said events to market the things that we have to offer to you. We don't then take it and look at their browser history and figure out where they bank and where they bought gas and where they ate dinner at and shopped and which credit cards they used. I mean, that's essentially what, according to what was filed, that they had accused Oracle of doing. So I have to ask, who thought that was an okay thing to do and who thought they had permission to do that at Oracle? And so every company, if they're going to check anything, they're going to hopefully ask those two questions. But I'm not sure if this is going to drive a lot of change of behavior.
Chris, who owns the data? And I asked this question because you think it would be intuitively obvious that we own our data. But if I take my data and I type it into a system owned by somebody else, didn't I just kind of give them my data? And did I understand the implications of that? Or, what is the definition of personal data?
Well, the real issue is we haven't defined that appropriately for our purposes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this, right? But, we're all old enough to remember before all this, and there was some mimeograph form that you put your social security number and everything else on so that you could, do some banking or rent a house or anything. In the early 90s, social security number hacks, and breaches were a lot of the conversation at that time. I mean, a lot of comments, but it's like, I have given that away to so many people, right? I'm going to base all of my security on the idea that nobody else on earth except me knows that 9-digit number. I got some bigger problems. So we're kind of in, an advanced state of that now. We have some bigger problems. We really don't know. And I think, to the point of this, particular incident, and I agree with Mitch, there's not a lot of money. It's enough, and it's reputational damage and so forth, to perhaps raise some eyebrows. Again, tiny little ratchets moving forward. But the answer inside Oracle, and to be clear, I have no insight into this, so I'm just guessing, is there were some legal people who looked at existing laws and regulations and said, we probably can. And it turns out they weren't right. But how would you really know? You would have, and this is a company with a serious money for a serious legal team. Hard to imagine there was no review whatsoever. So somebody somewhere erroneously looked at the policy environment they're in and said, we could probably do this and we'd make more money. And they probably made more money, but turned out they got in trouble for it.
And Mitch, we own websites here at Techstrong, and we're aware of all these folks who are quote unquote data brokers out there who are selling information to each other and sharing that. And it seems like it's a highly unregulated environment. So maybe we need to take a look at what's going on in that business as well, because I think this whole Oracle thing is part of that whole motion around data brokers, and people are kind of buying and selling data and correlating stuff and then matching that up with cookies. So they may not know it's you specifically, but they have like a 99% confidence rate that it is you that they're locked in on by your IP address and all this other stuff. So do we need to kind of take a giant step back and regulate this stuff? Because it seems like it just kind of grew up without any oversight.
Well, it's interesting. What we do regulate is protection of personally identifiable information. Sorry, it's too early in the day to get that out in one breath. PII. And that's essentially like any attribute or pieces of elements of data or combination of which you can identify, this is Mitch. Now I know all about him. I can find out where he lives and all these other things. And to your point, Chris, putting your social security number down on a form now seems akin to writing down your root password today, right? It's sort of one of the big keys to getting your data. So my point being, the regulation is about protection of that information because people are gathering it, and you have to disclose the uses for that. I mean, there are companies like Graph ID or ID Graph that have services that take that data and say, let us help you build, a more personalized experience, right? We talk about personalization a lot in software and experience in websites. So the problem with regulation is in this sense of something that we're doing on a massive scale, is you're looking so much in the rearview mirror, and you're forcing a change on what is already or running rampant in the culture, unless you have mechanisms of stamping it down, which you do have regulation. In other words, there really are true consequences. It's kind of, falls on deaf ears. I think I would focus more on this is where we are. How do we move forward? What's the way we want to move forward? And is there regulation that would help us get to that place versus let's take this insanely active area and then go try to, herd cats and get it together.
Chris, is there such a thing as a right to privacy? I'm finding a hard place to find that in the Constitution, and it kind of impacts a lot of conversations, shall we say, in a lot of other realms. But arguably, the internet is a public forum, and it's no different than if I walk down the street and decided to, go bang on a few windows and visit this one and that one and the other one. I mean, that's open for anybody to see. So isn't the internet just another public street?
Well, you're right. You took the analogy I was going to use, because we walk down the streets, and the fact that a lot of people suddenly walk down the street might be worth knowing. It might be a, exploding beehive or something on the other end. A lot of cell phones went into a pharmacy in this part of a city. That might have some value. And if you're walking down the street anyways, but I think we're better look to philosophy on privacy and practicality. Privacy is inside your head and inside your home to a given extent. But if you leave your lights on at night and all your drapes open and so forth, so somebody walking by in the street, and you have flashing lights to draw attention, whatever the situation is. But we all manage to live in this world. We understand that the people around us, can see us. To my Life 360 example of, I'm literally driving around. There are other ways to get caught doing things, and it's more of a, so we deal with all these things through a lot of practical mechanisms. Like on video conferencing. Right now that we can all turn our cameras on, I've been saying this one for 30 years, but when we get to this stage and you have a group of people on a call and everybody's on the camera except one, no one's going to ask why they turned their camera off, because that's creepy. We all, sometimes you don't want the camera on. Sometimes you turn off your location tracking. Why? None of your business. Literally. In fact, asking is weird, right? So I have optimism about this, like so many things, but because we already have ways of dealing with this, the real issue we have right now is time to transparency. I would like to see the technologies and perhaps the regulations or laws or whatnot, to require them. Competitive pressures are better, so that everybody can see who has their data right now. If it was going to be a regulation, I would like to say within 30 seconds, that Mitch should be able to, without taking 5 days and things that aren't going to practically happen in the real world, you can say, click, click, here's where my information is. That would be wonderful. And I think we'll get there someday.
Hey, Mitch, we talked about cookies and being creepy in the last segment. So while we're on that subject a little bit, AI. So now I got all this data and I'm like wrapping all this stuff into these AI models. Is it just going to get creepier?
Well, no doubt AI is and will continue to grow its application to data around advertising and cookies and user behavior. As I mentioned, I was just on a webinar about embedded analytics within applications. And of course, AI is part of that as well. So I think that's a fact of life. Does it venture you into the realm of, ooh, now that's creepy. That's a new thing. And I don't like that either. That's certainly possible. I mean, yeah, I would definitely think that would happen. So you could also flip the coin. So let me take the Chris Blask, I'm going to think about it positively approach. So if you could apply AI in a way that I want to create these experiences, but do it in these ways of what I'm trying to deliver as a customer experience, either my application or the advertising that I do or the marketing of what I do, etc. Then it could actually be a force for good. But I think it will be equally, if not more so, become another, it's not going to make cookies better to the end users. I have a hard time believing that. Sorry, Chris, I could only stay there for so long.
Chris, they say sunshine is the best disinfectant. Do we need like a creepy index where we're just tracking, who's doing what in the most creepiest way possible, so at least people have an idea?
I think if it's possible to do that sort of thing, someone will make that, and it may be a useful thing, for a while. But I think the term radical transparency gets used a lot in my world, in the supply chain world. And I think that the ultimate answer to this is that we put systems in place that allow everyone to see in the period of time available. Again, we have, in the U.S. and most, developed countries, we have reasonable tools where you can really track down information that you should be able to see. But the effort required is heroic, right? So I think as technology folks, we can make the world such that people can see what they need to see in the time they actually have available. And I think that's better than having a list of, shaming companies, though. Yeah, what the heck if it works? But better yet to take the question away. I know where my data is. I know where my information is. I know who's using it. I'm okay with that. We're not there yet.
Mitch, can you envision a world where this is actually a campaign issue? Maybe not in this presidential cycle, but down the road somewhere, as more people become aware of what's going on with their data. Will this become something that somebody will make part of a political platform?
Well, after we solve the border problem, then we can move on to this one.
Wow, that's a data problem.
Oh, a data problem. I see. Yes, it's a data problem. Yeah, lots of things. I think if as far as it being a political campaign, it has to be at a level where this is impacting people's lives, and you're trying to better that through leadership, through government, through regulatory actions, things like that. I think most people are not watching the privacy laws and wanting to know when they're going to add this, their particular flavor to that, unless they're in that industry, right? The Chris's and Mitch's and others that are, heavily into the regulatory side. Could it be? Again, I think those behaviors and changes in behaviors are driven by major events. If we had something that really, Mike, I've waxed on about don't PR companies don't contact me about another breach. That's not news that there was another breach. That's like, telling me there's error. Yes, it happens. And yes, it's a big one. And right. Okay, who cares? That's consumers don't care because they're not changing their behavior. I want to know who's done something to make it better, to make it less likely, to improve it, to help companies recover. That I'm interested in talking about. Kind of the same thing here. Like, I don't really want to get into the, details of privacy regulation in a political campaign, but I do want to know what we can do to make it better for the end user. If it's Chris's idea of, let me make it easy, be careful what you ask for, but let me make it easy for you to see where your data is and potentially how it's being used. I think that might scare a lot of people, to your point about you're not Googling about Yankees because you don't want to get hammered with information and ads and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I look at it.
All right. Well,
I gotta get an answer to that one, because I think the short answer is yes, and in all capital letters underlined with 5 exclamation points. And I'm in Canada right now, right? And it's a good example because these countries are so similar. So you strip everything away. What is the brand of a company, a country, whatnot? The brand of America is transparent. And I would take this to 11. And I've actually literally been arguing, discussing this with folks in 3-letter agencies recently in a conversation, a structured conversation with some folks who do influence operations for the Department of Defense, outbound, in other nations. And I think as America should say, be transparent literally about everything, just ridiculously so. Yeah, careful what you wish for, right? All sorts of ways we do things. We're really putting it out to sea and seeing how it survives in real weather, right? To the point where, and I may be naive about this, but I don't know. It's a complex world. I think if the U.S. military is performing influence operations, trying to change opinions in some foreign nation, we should tag it with U.S. military influence operation. Just say it. Here's we want, you folks to accept this sort of idea. So we're presenting this sort of idea, and always do that. Always, always. So everybody can always see everything they should. Right?
Don't we have radio programs?
Radical transparency doesn't mean that everybody sees everything. It means that if you have a right to see something, you can see it now, and you can see it in a timely fashion. And I think on the political front, the sociological front, can we have less trust in governance and government? No. So, just saying we're going to pursue a path where every opportunity we have, so constituents, stakeholders, citizens have faster access to the information they have every right to have, so that you don't have to go down to the courthouse and spend 90 days or 90 minutes even but we can build in the systems that all information is as transparent as physically possible. And I think you can win elections that way. And hearts and minds.
We will see if that plays out, but the odds that there will be a constitutional amendment that will then need to be approved by 2/3 of the states in the next 5 to 6 years is probably pretty low. But hey, if we start banging the drum today, who knows? And remember,
all I can say, Mike, is I endorse the subliminal messages of the past 45 minutes in this conversation.
There you go. We are trying to do our best. But that said, you know what? The attitude towards big tech is changing in DC. So who knows? Maybe things will get different in a hurry. Anyway, thank you all for participating in the latest Techstrong Gang episode. Chris, as always, Mitch, as always, thank you all for watching. And we have a great set of lineups for Techstrong TV coming up right behind us. And we will see you guys on Monday.